A park bench in Haarlem, Netherlands. Spring 1943. A teenage girl with braided pigtails approaches a woman sitting alone reading a newspaper. The girl looks about 12 years old. Innocent. Harmless. She smiles and asks, "Excuse me, what's your name?" The woman looks up, tells her. The girl pulls out a pistol from her coat pocket, aims at the woman's chest, and fires. Once. Twice. The woman slumps forward, dead. The girl calmly places the gun back in her pocket, walks to her bicycle leaning against a nearby tree, climbs on and pedals away. No one stops her. No one suspects her. She's just a child on a bicycle. Her name is Freddie Overstegen. She's 16 years old, not 12. And the woman she just killed was a Dutch collaborator who possessed a list, names and addresses of every Jewish family hiding in the region. That list was about to be handed to the Gestapo. It would have meant the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. Men, women, children, entire families. Freddie had just saved them all. By the end of World War II, she and her older sister Truus would assassinate dozens of Nazis and Dutch traitors. The exact number? No one knows. They never said. When journalists asked years later, Freddie always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier any of that. This is a story of two teenage sisters who seduced Nazi officers with smiles and flirtation, lured them into dark forests with promises of romance, and shot them in the back of the head. Sisters who learned to kill in a freezing underground potato cellar. Sisters who bombed railway lines, smuggled Jewish children across borders, and burned Nazi supply depots to the ground. Sisters who refused to murder children, even when ordered to do so by their own commanders. Sisters who remained human while fighting monsters. And it all started with bicycle. Freddie Nanda Overstegen was born on September 6, 1925, in the small village of Schoten, just outside Haarlem. Her childhood was anything but ordinary. Her family lived on a houseboat on the canal. Her father worked odd jobs but never made much money. Her mother, Trintje, was a committed communist who believed in one simple principle. When you see injustice, you don't look away. You act. When Freddie was still young, her parents divorced. The day they left the houseboat, her father stood on the bow and sang a French farewell song as they drifted away. She barely saw him after that. Trintje moved Freddie and her older sister Truus into a cramped apartment in Haarlem. They slept on mattresses stuffed with straw. They had almost nothing. One table, a few chairs, hardly any food. But their mother still made room for strangers. Jewish refugees fleeing persecution in Germany. Political dissidents running from the Gestapo. People whose names Freddie and Truus sometimes never even learned. The sisters grew up sharing their beds, their food, their space with people who had nowhere else to go. Trintje taught them to make dolls and send them to children suffering in the Spanish Civil War. She taught them that empathy isn't a feeling, it's an action. She told them over and over. If you want to help somebody, you must be willing to make sacrifices. It was a lesson they would carry into the darkest days of their lives. May 10th, 1940. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. The Dutch military fought back for 5 days. Then they surrendered. Freddie was 14 years old. Truus was 16. The occupation began immediately. German soldiers filled the streets of Haarlem. Swastika flags hung from every public building. New laws, new restrictions, new fears. Jews were required to register. Curfews were enforced. Radios were confiscated. Anyone who resisted was arrested, beaten, or shot. Freddie remembered the fear vividly. I remember how people were taken from their homes. The Germans banged on doors with the butts of their rifles. It made so much noise you could hear it throughout the entire neighborhood. And they would always yell. It was very frightening. But the Overstegen family didn't cower. They resisted. Freddie and Truus joined their mother in distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets and illegal underground newspapers. At night, they snuck through the streets with paste and paper, covering German propaganda posters with their own messages. The Netherlands must be free. Don't work for Germany. For every Dutchman working in Germany, a German soldier goes to the front. Then they would race away on their bicycles, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging. knowing that if they were caught, they would be executed. But they were never caught. After all, who would suspect two young girls on bicycles? Their activities did not go unnoticed. In 1941, a man named Frans van der Wiel came to their door. He was a commander of the Haarlem Council Resistance, part of the underground network fighting the Nazi occupation. He had heard about the Oversteegen family, the mother who sheltered refugees, the daughters who distributed illegal newspapers. He wanted to recruit them. He asked Trijns directly, "Can your daughters join the resistance?" Freddie was 15. Truus was 17. Their mother said yes without hesitation. The girls said yes too, but van der Wiel wasn't convinced. He needed to know if they could be trusted, if they would break under pressure. So he tested them. A few days later, he returned to their apartment. This time, he was dressed as a Gestapo officer. He burst through the door, waving a pistol, screaming in German, demanding to know where a Jewish man was hiding. Freddie and Truus didn't flinch. They didn't give up a single name. They didn't beg for mercy. Instead, they fought back, kicking, punching, scratching a man they believed was a Nazi officer, refusing to betray anyone even if it meant their own deaths. Van der Wiel stopped the act and revealed himself. They had passed the test. Now, he told them what joining the resistance would actually mean. "You'll learn to sabotage bridges and railway lines," he said. Then he paused. "And you'll learn to shoot Nazis." Truus looked at her younger sister. Freddie grinned and said, "Well, that's something I've never done before." Their mother gave them one final piece of advice before they left for training. Always stay human. The Oversteegen sisters were taken to a secret location, an underground potato shed hidden in the countryside. There, in the cold darkness beneath the earth, they learned to fire a weapon. They practiced aiming, breathing, staying calm under pressure. They learned how to kill. Their first mission wasn't assassination. It was arson. The resistance had identified several Nazi supply warehouses that needed to be destroyed, but they were heavily guarded by SS soldiers. The plan was simple. Freddie and Truus would approach the guards, talk to them, laugh with them, flirt with them, distract them while the rest of the resistance team slipped in from behind and set the fires. It worked perfectly. The warehouses burned. The guards never suspected the two teenage girls who had been chatting with them just moments before. Frans van der Wiel saw what they were capable of. These girls could go places men couldn't. They could get close to targets no one else could reach. Their youth, their innocence, their gender, these were weapons more powerful than any gun. It was time for them to learn what that truly meant. Freddie's first kill wasn't a German soldier. It was a Dutch woman, a collaborator, a traitor. The resistance had received intelligence about this woman. She had compiled a detailed list, names, addresses, hiding places, of every Jewish family in the Haarlem region. She was planning to hand it over to the Gestapo in exchange for money. That list was a death sentence for hundreds of people. Entire families would be rounded up, deported to concentration camps, and murdered. The resistance gave Freddie the assignment. She was told where the woman would be. A public park. Midday. Freddie rode her bicycle there. She found her target sitting on a bench. Freddie approached casually. Just a girl with braided hair and a friendly smile. She asked, "What's your name?" The woman told her. Freddie confirmed she had the right person. She reached into her coat, pulled out a pistol, looked the woman directly in the eyes, and shot her. The woman fell forward. Freddie calmly returned the gun to her pocket, walked to her bicycle, and rode away. Later, she would describe what it felt like. "The first thing you want to do when you shoot somebody is pick them up. The instinct to help, even after you've killed them. That impulse never left me. No matter how many times I pulled the trigger." Freddie and Truus developed their own techniques. Sometimes they worked alone, sometimes together. Their methods evolved as they learned what worked and what didn't. The most common technique was the forest walk. They would enter bars and taverns where German officers gathered after dark. One sister would walk in alone, strike up a conversation with a young officer, laugh at his jokes, touch his arm, lean in close. Then she would ask the question, "Would you like to go for a walk? It's such a beautiful night." The officer always said yes. They would walk into the forest together, deeper and deeper, away from the roads, away from witnesses, away from anyone who might hear a gunshot. And there, hidden among the trees, the other sister would be waiting. One bullet to the head. The officer would fall. They would bury his body in a hole they had already dug earlier that day, covered with dirt and leaves, and walk back to their bicycles. Just two girls enjoying the fresh air. Nothing suspicious. Other times, speed was a weapon. Truus would pedal the bicycle, while Freddie sat on the back, pistol concealed under her coat. They would identify their target, usually a Nazi officer or a known Dutch collaborator, walking down a street. They would ride past him casually. And just as they passed, Freddie would pull out the gun, fire, and they would keep riding. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the girls were already blocks away. Just two young girls on a bicycle. Nothing unusual about that. We always went by bike, never walked. Truus explained years later. Walking was too dangerous. I always made sure the coast was clear. That worked very well. The doorstep method was riskier, but effective. Sometimes they would follow a target for days, learning his address, his routine, his schedule. Then they would knock on his door late at night. When he opened it, he would see a young girl standing there, innocent, harmless, maybe lost or in need of help. By the time he realized the danger, it was too late. One shot, close range, then disappear into the night. In 1943, a third member joined their cell. Her name was Janet Johanna Shaft. Everyone called her Hanny. She was different from the Oversteegen sisters. Hanny came from a middle-class family. Her father was a schoolteacher. She had been studying law at the University of Amsterdam, planning to become a human rights lawyer. But when the Nazis demanded that all students sign a loyalty oath to Germany, Hanny refused. She was expelled. She didn't go home. She joined the resistance. Hanny had distinctive features that made her stand out. Bright red hair, green eyes, pale skin. The kind of face people remembered. It would eventually get her killed. But first, she would become one of the most feared resistance fighters in the Netherlands. Frans van der Wiel tested Hanny the same way he had tested the Oversteegen sisters. He gave her a gun and sent her to assassinate a Nazi officer. She approached the target in broad daylight, raised the weapon with shaking hands, and pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. It had been a test. The Nazi officer revealed himself as van der Wiel. She had passed. Now she joined Freddie and Truus. The three young women formed a lethal unit. Hanny was the intellectual, the planner, the strategist, the one who thought through every detail. Truus was a leader, decisive, fearless, the one who made the hard calls when no one else could. Freddie was a scout, the one who mapped out escape routes, memorized street layouts, and always knew three ways out of any situation. Together, they were unstoppable. The three women didn't just kill. They sabotaged railway lines to derail trains carrying Jews to concentration camps. They smuggled Jewish children out of the country, sometimes walking them across borders in the dead of night. They stole identity papers and forged documents to help refugees disappear into new lives. They gathered intelligence on German troop movements and weapon depots and passed it to Allied forces. And yes, they killed German soldiers, Nazi officers, Dutch collaborators. The Dutch traitors were often the most dangerous targets. These were citizens who betrayed their own people for money, power, or favor with the occupiers. People who turned in their Jewish neighbors. People who worked for the Gestapo. People who sent resistance fighters to their deaths. Freddie and Truus focused more and more on these collaborators as the war dragged on. We were dealing with cancerous tumors in society. Truus explained later. You had to cut them out like a surgeon. You couldn't arrest them. You couldn't put them on trial. There was no other solution. One day, an order came from resistance leadership. The target, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Reich Commission of the Netherlands, one of the most powerful Nazis in the country. The mission, kidnap his children. The plan, use the children as leverage to force Seyss-Inquart to release resistance prisoners. And if he refused, kill the children. Freddie, Truus, and Hanny refused the mission outright. Freddie said it plainly. We are not like the Nazis. Resistance fighters don't murder children. They had killed many people. They would kill more. But children? Never. That was the line between resistance and terrorism, between fighting evil and becoming it. They would not cross it. One afternoon, Truus was cycling through the streets of Haarlem when she witnessed something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A Dutch SS soldier, a Dutchman who had volunteered to join the Nazi forces, was standing in the middle of the street. He had grabbed an infant from a Jewish family. The father was there, screaming. The baby's older sister was hysterical, crying, begging. The soldier held the baby up by its legs and smashed it against a brick wall. The child died instantly. Truus stopped her bicycle. She pulled out her pistol and shot the soldier dead. Right there, in the middle of the street, in broad daylight. It was an assignment. There were no orders, no plan. That wasn't a mission, she said years later. But I don't regret it. Some things don't need orders. By 1944, Hannie Schaaf was one of the most wanted people in the Netherlands. Her red hair had been spotted at too many assassination scenes. Witnesses had described her. Word had spread. The Nazis issued a bulletin. Find the girl with the red hair. Hannie dyed her hair black. She started wearing glasses. She changed her appearance as much as she could, but she didn't stop fighting. In June 1944, she and a fellow resistance fighter named Jan Boonkamp were assigned to assassinate a Dutch collaborator named Willem Ragu. They found him. Boonkamp shot him. But Ragu didn't die immediately. And in the chaos, Boonkamp was shot in the stomach. Hannie escaped. Boonkamp was captured. He was taken to a hospital. Dying, the Nazis interrogated him. He refused to talk. Then an officer tried a different tactic. He pretended to be a resistance member, told Boonkamp he was there to help, that he was a friend. Boonkamp, delirious from blood loss and morphine, believed him. He gave up Hannie's address. He died shortly after. The Nazis raided Hannie's parents' home. They arrested her mother and father and sent them to a concentration camp. Hannie went into hiding. She couldn't fight anymore. If she was captured, everyone she knew would die. For months, she stayed underground, moving from safe house to safe house. But she couldn't stay hidden forever. March 21st, 1945. The war was almost over. Allied forces were advancing across Europe. Liberation was just weeks away. Hannie was cycling through Haarlem, carrying copies of an illegal communist newspaper and a pistol hidden in her coat. She was stopped at a Nazi checkpoint. They searched her. They found everything. She was arrested immediately. They took her to a prison in Amsterdam. For weeks, they interrogated her, tortured her, kept her in solitary confinement. They knew they had captured someone important, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they noticed something. Her hair was dyed black, but her roots were growing in, red. They had found the girl with the red hair. Hannie admitted to the assassinations. She confessed to what she had done, but she never gave up a single name. Not Freddie, not Truus, not anyone. She protected her friends until the very end. April 17th, 1945. Just 18 days before the Netherlands would be liberated. The war was effectively over. Everyone knew it. There was even an informal agreement between the Nazis and the Dutch resistance to stop executions. But Willy Lages, the Nazi officer in charge of Hannie's case, ignored it. He wanted Hannie Schaaf dead. 2 Dutch collaborators, traitors to their own country, were assigned as her executioners. Their names were Matthias Schmitz and Martin Kuiper. They took Hannie to the sand dunes of Overveen, the same dunes where hundreds of resistance fighters had already been killed and buried in mass graves. Schmitz raised his pistol and fired. The bullet grazed Hannie's head. It wounded her badly, but it didn't kill her. She looked up at her executioner, blood streaming down her face, and said calmly, "I shoot better than you." Kuiper raised a submachine gun and fired a burst into her chest. Hannie Schaaf died in those dunes. She was 24 years old. They buried her in a shallow grave, so shallow that strands of her red hair were still visible above the sand. The Netherlands was liberated on May 5, 1945, 18 days after Hannie died. After the war, they found 422 bodies buried in the Overveen dunes. 421 men and 1 woman, Hannie Schaaf. She was given a state funeral. Queen Wilhelmina called her the symbol of the resistance. Statues were built in her honor. Streets were named after her. But Freddie and Truus? They received nothing. For decades, the Dutch government ignored them. Why? Because they were communists. During the Cold War, anyone with communist ties was sidelined, forgotten, treated with suspicion. The sisters who had risked their lives to save their country were now treated like enemies of the state.